Nice
Okay.
to see you.
You too. You
How
too.
are you, my dear?
You know what? I'm tired, but I'm okay now. But I was tired all morning because I woke up too darned early. And
Oh,
that was so annoying. But anyway, never mind. I'm okay. I'm here and
good.
glad to see you.
Same
Yeah.
to you. Yeah.
Am
So
am
do you have your paper handy?
I
Your
do.
Okay. So I was wondering something because Grandma, kept those diaries for all those years. And
Yes.
you've done some documenting yourself, but just in a little bit of a different way. And I was curious to know, I always wonder why people want to write stuff down. So what was your motivation? Did you do it for you? Was it for your kids? What was the thinking behind making some notes about your life?
Well, it seems to me that when I first began, it was a January, I think, and I was feeling a little, I don't know if I want to say down, but just at it, loose ends or something. And so I just thought, well, I think I'm going to start writing some stuff. And then as I got going, it just blossomed into ever so much more. When I get reading it, I think, oh my gosh, how did you come up with all that stuff? So I did it for myself first, I would say. And then I was happy to share it with cousins and ask questions and stuff like that from other people that I knew would have lived through that era. So then, of course, I sent it to my kids, and I haven't heard all that much from them, but I do have the hard copy because, as I said, when I'm gone, I know who's going to have time to go looking through all these files on the computer and that. So I just thought I'll make a hard copy. Somebody will read it. And
Hmm.
then here you go. Here, I never thought that it was going to be Eleanor that would be prying me for information, prying into my stuff for information. That's good. I appreciate it. Yeah.
Ah, I'm very interested in the stuff that you've written down. And really, when you look at what you're calling the life and times of Mary MacArthur, in brackets McNabb, starting in this is from 1937 to 1957.
Hmm.
You can count how many pages this is, but it's very dense. Like there's a lot of information in each page.
Yeah, there
So
is.
depending on how you want to tackle this, I had some ideas because I certainly couldn't put you through all this in one day.
No, well, I expected you to have some questions, and I'll
Yeah.
just field the questions if I can. So,
Yeah, so I have sort of some tabs here. What I'm hoping you'll do is read some of it. Like I want you to read it.
oh, okay.
Do you feel like doing that?
I can. Is my voice okay?
Oh yeah. And the thing is that I have marked sort of a page that like I don't even know if we would get this far, but I just thought we could do it in parts. Like maybe today we'll do a little bit and we'll just pick up where we left off on another day.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, so I want to hear a little bit about the life and times of my Auntie Mary. So
Okay.
take it away.
Okay. I was born in my mom and dad's bed on the farm near Snowflake, Manitoba. I believe that Nurse Grace Mackenzie helped with the delivery. My sister Myrna had just had her 7th birthday and was always my big sister for as long as I can remember. Then this was written, of course, quite a while ago. She was still alive. Recently, she told me that she liked having a little sister. She certainly did a lot of things for me over the years. It was June 27th, 1937. The seeding would have been done and haying season just beginning. The dirty 30s, a period of drought and depression, was slowly coming to an end, but World War II was looming. Of course, I have no memories of those very early years, but I know that life revolved around the farm, the extended family, and the community. I know that I was safe and loved. That is enough for any little one, isn't it? My mother would have nursed me, and as there were no bought baby foods except maybe pablum, I would have been brought up on nutritious, mashed up, real food and milk puddings. The few treasured snapshots taken in those days help with my story, as does talking with my cousins, or until recently with my sister. I have a picture taken at the Booker farm with my great aunt Winnie holding me as a baby, and with Sister Myrna, my cousins Faye and Donna Hillman, Doreen and Jean Booker, a few years older, lined up in their best outfits. A picture taken in our yard shows me in the little white doll bed with Myrna proudly sitting in the grass alongside. The lilacs and the garden gate were in the background. We needed fences and gates because the chickens that roamed free in the summer liked to visit the garden. Apparently, I enjoyed playing in the mud, as there was one of me by the pump, dressed in a little sunsuit, surveying the mess I had made. My hair was curly and somewhat unruly. Only the color has since changed. My first memories seem to emerge at around the age of 4 or 5. There is a picture of Myrna and me in the garden with a huge watermelon. We always had a good garden for as long as I could remember, and I will tell more about that as the story unfolds. I was surprised to see that the trees were not as tall as I thought them to be. Dad and Mum were forever planting trees as shelter belts. The grass was not called a lawn, as it grew to be rather tall until Dad had time to cut it with a team of horses and a side mower. Our yard was large and power mowers were not yet common. But one of our jobs was to rake the yard with a hand rake. I guess we would feed the fresh hay to the cows in the barnyard. We just tossed it over the fence. He did not let the cattle run loose as we had a big pasture and a barnyard for them. One memory which I have is of a party at the farm for either my 5th or 6th birthday. So that would have been in 1942. War was still going. Cousin Yvonne brought her pony, Trixie, she was a Shetland pony, over to give rides. I'm not sure of how many cousins were there, but I guess I thought I should get the most rides because I started to cry when I was treated just like anyone else. Poor baby. Also, I think Mom made birthday cookies instead of cake because it made better use of the precious sugar. We were probably healthier without so much sugar anyway. Tell me when you want me to stop.
I want you to keep going.
Okay. Do you remember hand-me-downs? Sometimes we were happy to get them, and sometimes not. I got some cute clothes from the Hillmans, but I do remember one brown camel pile coat I saw coming, and I was hoping something would happen to it before it reached me. But it didn't, and I hated every minute wearing it. There was a seamstress, Miss Anna Rickerby, who made her living by traveling from home to home doing the big sewing projects. For example, Mom would take a grown coat. Okay, she would take a grown-up coat and cut a small one or two from it. She made a snowsuit for me from a wine wool coat we had sent to us from richer relatives from Ontario or the States. Mom would have some patterns and would have done all the ripping out, cleaning, and pressing it to be ready. She would live at each place until the job was done and move on to the next. She was not very friendly, and one sure stayed still to avoid a poke from her pins. In retrospect, I don't imagine her life was too rewarding. Wouldn't that be awful? Just, yeah. In April of 1942, my baby brother Bob was born. Talk about being naive. I never even knew that a baby was coming. People didn't confide in their children in those days. So one morning, my dad awakened me. Wake up, Mary, you have a new baby brother. What? A new baby brother? Where's Mom? Oh, she's in Crystal City in the nursing home. I took her there during the night. She'll be home in about a week with the new baby. Well, I can't remember being lonesome for Mom, but I must have been. My sister Myrna was coming 12, and she would have been in grade 6 and busy with school. A farm girl, Lorraine Pease, came to help with the work and to look after us. She was nice. I'm pretty sure Dad took me along to get Mom during the spring break. I can almost envision that room with the high iron cribs that they had the babies in. I don't know whether I really can or not, but it seems like I could. I'm pretty sure Dad took me along to get Mom during spring breakup, and with their old car, it was amazing that they got there at all. And I think Bob could tell you more about the story. They've told him about that. Like they had to go around by Laravere, Pilot Mound to get to Crystal City because the roads were so bad. So it would have been at least 25 miles, and with her in labor, oh my God. Although the war in Europe had begun in 1939, my uncles Clarence, Eldon, and Wilbur weren't quite old enough to enlist. They later signed up and were sent overseas. I'm not sure about Uncle Clarence, but the others went in 1942. I think he went earlier. He was older than they were. I remember the big family picnic at the Booker farm with Eldon and Wilbur there in their uniforms just before they were shipped out. There is a picture of them with their girlfriends wearing those jaunty little army hats. Aunt Lillian was one of those pretty girls. I cannot imagine the worries of my grandparents and the sisters. They didn't share those worries with the children. People didn't try to worry their kids in those days. I should mention that Uncle Jack, the youngest of the family, trained in the Air Force, but the war ended before he was sent overseas. We used to watch the trainers fly over and wonder if he was in one of them. It was during one of the Booker gatherings that I had an interesting experience with a pail of milk. I had on a very pretty little dress and accidentally backed up and sat down in a full pail of fresh milk. I remember being heartbroken, but my cousin Cheryl Booker from Indian Head, who was there with her mom and dad, had an extra little dress that they let me use until mine was washed and dried. I think I was very embarrassed as well as worried, but no one punished me or let on that I was a klutz. And speaking of this, the video you sent of your dad playing, I've sent that on to people, and I've heard from Marilyn, I've heard from Cheryl's daughter Kelly Andrus, and they just loved the music and just said got their toes tapping. So isn't that wonderful?
It is.
I should make mention of the effect the war had on our lives. Besides the worry about the boys from home fighting over there, Canada involved us all in the war effort. War bonds were sold, and the children could even collect war-saving stamps, which would be honored in a certain number of years. I remember taking 25 cents to school and having them glued onto the certificate until it was full. I think that was when it reached $5. Rationing was imposed on sugar, butter, meat, gasoline, and other things. We had our own meat and butter, so weren't affected as much as those in the cities. It was the sugar ration that was the worst for us. You weren't supposed to hoard, but I remember Mom saving as much as she could for the canning of fruit and for the Christmas cake. And what they did is they hoarded. They put the sugar that they could save into a metal pail with a sealed lid, and they hid it in the hay in the barn, I guess. Yeah,
that's interesting.
Because apparently inspectors we always feared that inspectors were going to come around and find out who was hoarding stuff that was supposed to be going to the war effort.
Wow.
So, I don't know whether that was just a gossip, I don't know whether it happened. Anyway, so she saved as much as she could for the canning of fruit and for the Christmas cake. We ate very little sweet baking until the war was over, and then did we pig out. Wow. Mom would prepare a box of goodies to be sent through the Red Cross to her brothers overseas. It would have fruit cake, a few chocolate bars, and gum if she could get them, and of course home knit socks and maybe tooth powder or other such necessities. Cigarettes were also included, I believe, which they could trade for other things even from the locals. We had a radio operated by big dry cell batteries. It was hooked up to listen to the BBC News and a few other special programs. And then I said, too bad I don't know a little bit more about that. You didn't just go and turn the radio on any old time. There were certain programs that we watched. There was something at noon, The Happy Gang. It was an hour long, I think, or half an hour. And then there was Lux Radio Theater on Monday nights. And then, of course, there was the hockey game too. So, but you didn't just watch just because you were bored or something.
Right.
There was no kindergarten in those days, so I was at home until I was 6. By today's standards, life must have been pretty boring, but if it was, we didn't know it. I had a few toys, a Wedham's doll that I liked, and later on a doll with eyes that opened and closed, which I still have, by the way. Don't let anybody play with her because once touched, the eyes fall into the head. I guess Mom let me help with things and I could play with my little brother. Dad let me tag along when he was working in the yard. One thing I was good at was stepping in cow pies. Just couldn't seem to miss them. My sister often had the unpleasant task of cleaning my boots. Oh, dear. Sometimes I got to stay at my grandma Booker's and she let me help to make pancakes. She kept the eggs in a dumbwaiter, which was like a cupboard on pulleys that you could lower to the cellar where it was cooler and then raise as needed in the kitchen. Also, she had a set of quintuplet dolls and a crib, which we could carefully play with when we were old enough to know how to appreciate them. You didn't disobey Grandma, and you never even thought of doing so. I think the boys did, though. I think her sons did. I think they drove her a bit. She loved little children, but was quite firm. In the summer, she had her sisters, our great Aunt Winnie and Aunt Hattie, came to visit sometimes. They brought little gifts for us, for the nieces and nephews, which some of us treasured for years. One I remembered was a satin kind of envelope thing for holding your hankies. Everybody had, that was a gift that you'd be given, was a nice hanky, which you
Yeah.
would take to church. It was, or you tied your penny in the corner of the hanky. That was your collection for Sunday school. Another piece is a piece of jewelry from Aunt Hattie, which I still have. I could take a picture of it and send it to you.
Sure.
It's quite understated, but it apparently has a bit of value to it, monetary value.
I was expecting to have more questions. I mean, the war is really, really foreign to me to think of relatives going to war because that has not happened in my lifetime.
No.
That's a bit unrelatable. Of course, I know about it because it was always talked about that some of Grandma's brothers went. And I'm sure everyone was quite worried about their safe return,
Mm-hmm.
I do remember that picture. I'd like to see it again when they're in their uniforms. Is there anything you would elaborate about that time?
Well, I don't know whether I told about this or not, but like at school, we were definitely kept in touch with what was going on by the weekly free press that came and by the BBC news broadcasts. And, like we were very patriotic at school. Like you sang "O Canada" in the morning, "Oh God Save the King," before you went home. Sometimes I remember us saluting the flag. And as I said, on Fridays, we had these Red Cross meetings, and that was when we bought these, if you were lucky enough to have ordered or buy these stamps. And I don't, it's funny, I don't remember the details. I'm sure there were kids that weren't able to buy them, and we certainly weren't rich, but it was important to our family to do that, And it was a bond, of course, so you got back, you got the money back eventually. But yeah, it was very important to. We didn't try to worry us about the war, but we were made very aware of the war effort. The war effort. People knit socks and they, did stuff to send overseas if they could. So, yeah.
And those things got to them?
Well, they went through the Red Cross. Like the box that Mom she would send this Christmas stuff, the Red Cross provided these boxes, and I'm trying to think like how big they'd be. Okay, you can see where my shoulders are maybe here. They weren't a huge box. It was like bigger than a shoebox, I think. And they were lined, they were cardboard, but they were lined with a kind of a wax paper, heavy wax paper. And then They were, I probably you could send them in the mail without paying. I'm expecting you could because it was war effort. So yeah, they would get them and they would talk about when somebody would get a box and the good guys would share, and there were some that hoarded their stuff and didn't share, and the uncles would tell us about that, later
Yeah.
on. Yeah.
The only other thing that's on my mind that's totally unrelated to the war is you talked about a watermelon. We never grew a watermelon. I didn't know you could grow those out there.
Yeah, I don't know. Like we grew them and we grew what they call muskmelons, which would be cantaloupe.
Yeah, we did too, but never a watermelon. That was a
Yeah, and there's
surprise to me to read that.
there's a picture of it there, but there's like it's
I
a
can't.
good big one, just like you get in the store. You know where Hanford's lived, Ross Hanford's lived down,
Well,
down.
in the valley,
No, no, I guess that would be before your time. Yeah.
that would be the Hanfords I know.
Anyway, there was people called butlers, and they originally were from Kansas, Mr. and Mrs. Butler. And they grew watermelons like you wouldn't believe. And sometimes they had watermelons sent up or went down for a holiday. And I remember getting very sick eating too much watermelon and barfing all over the wallpaper beside my bed. Because you just love that water. So I don't think we grew enough watermelons to this would have been a special year when there was a lot of watermelon. So I think probably that getting that picture, I don't imagine that was a normal thing. They
No.
were smaller watermelons, but yeah.
I
So
love all the pictures because any pictures you're sending me, I'm always wondering exactly where they are on the farm because the background is the same backdrop of my childhood. It just looks
okay.
different. Yeah.
Well, I think your dad probably has an almost identical book,
Yeah.
except he wouldn't have the pictures of Myrna. Like I don't have a lot of Myrna when she was a little girl.
Yeah.
And but I think your dad has one of those albums that would have quite a few of the same pictures. But I will definitely take some pictures of them and send them to you. That's not a problem.
Yeah, that's great. If you just go through this and see what pictures are mentioned, I'll put it up while you're reading it. So,
Like you have to realize that our school was it was three rooms, one above the other. And I don't know if the one in the basement originally was meant to be a classroom or not. I'm not sure, but it was quite small. And when I was going to school, when Auntie Myrna was in high school, um, it was in the basement because high school was in the basement, and then the primary room, 1 to 4, was on the ground level, although it really wasn't ground level. You went up steps too. And then way up this huge flight of stairs was where the grades 5 to 8 classroom was. So then by the time I got into high school, we had a principal come and he wasn't going down into that basement to teach. So the little kids ended up there. But there was smaller classrooms by this time too. So anyway, recess and noon hours at school. I must relate what I can remember. In the summer, the little kids played running games and dodgeball. We played 7-Up, a bouncing game, which I try to teach my kids how to do that down the basement here, against the side of the school. Do you know that game, 7-Up?
well, I was thinking it might have been the name for dodgeball.
No, 7-Up
Oh,
is you threw the ball against the school 7 times, throw, catch. So the next
ah,
time for 6, you let it throw, bounce once, catch it. For 5, you let it bounce once, and then you used a pat down and then picked it up. So there was something different. You tried to get all the way back to 1, and then if you could do that, which some people could, you'd start over again at 7, and you'd do clap between each one. So it was
I, I, I
quite a
never played that one.
skillful game. Soon we learned to play ball by playing scrub or move up, as some called it. If you were fast and got the bat from the cloakroom, you and one or two friends were the batters. Then the next fastest ones became catcher, pitcher, first, second, third, shortstop, and the rest of the herd were fielders. If the batter went out, he or she became last in the field, but with a 15-minute recess and the fastest and best batters in control, the lowly fielders seldom got to bat. Did we tattle? Of course not. I don't remember the teachers doing supervision, but I guess they came out sometimes. As we got older, we also played volleyball, but on the outdoors, and it was a far cry from the game we see today. There were 8 players, and the serving was all underhand. In winter, we were sent out to play unless it was too extremely cold or stormy. The old Melton cloth ski pants. Do you know what they were?
I don't think so.
They're woolen ski pants.
Huh.
Would get thick with chunks of snow, which, when melted, would lend an aroma of their own as they dried in the cloakroom. Some games I remember were Prisoner's Base, Pom Pom Pull Away, Fox and Geese, and Red Rover. The rink was right on the corner of the playground. It was a covered one with skating on one side of the walkway and curling on the other. There were separate waiting rooms. When the snow was shoveled out the windows, it formed banks that afforded no end of sliding fun for us on the playground, on the school playground. We even carried pails of waters from the pump house to speed up the slides. No one seemed to worry about us getting hurt, and they didn't. It's funny, how we just did that.
I haven't heard of putting water on the slides to speed them up before.
Yeah, well,
That's pretty inventive.
Yeah. How did we get to school? Well, the town kids walked and the country kids came by van, as ours was a consolidated school. The van routes were tendered each year, and the lowest bidder usually got the job. Ours seemed to alternate between Archie Milger, later his son Bud, and Bill Brown. In summer, they piled us all into their cars, 2 or 3 deep, and in the spring, a horse-pulled contraption, something like a covered wagon. And in winter, it was a little house on sleighs with a stove inside. Lots of fun was had in those vans, but the drivers didn't let us get too much out of line. The boys would like to fly my scarf like a flag, but the only time I retaliated and tossed someone's empty lunchbox out, I had to run out and get it. I remember the drivers getting in on the fun, speeding up the horses when someone jumped out to retrieve a mitt or a toque. Not fair, but I can't say that I walked 3 miles to school uphill both ways. We walked to the end of the lane in summer and the fall to meet the van. In the winter, we could watch from an upstairs window through a tiny spot that was not frosted over to see the van pulled by horses coming across the field. So that would have been coming from like Uncle Wilbur's, where they lived, like the people, Landon Booker, I suppose. I don't even know who came. But anyway, and so then that would mean we'd hustle out because we were brought up not to make the van wait, I can tell you that. So the highlights of the school year were the Christmas concert and the district field meet. So this Christmas concert, we started practicing for that at the beginning of December. Like now, when I think back, I can see what the teachers were doing. They were plays, and so of course they had no duplicating machine or anything like that. So they just had you, if the older students wrote out the parts for the play. So that took a bit of time, and of course it kept us busy while the teachers were so damn busy, but I never realized that at the time, how busy it was with 4 grades, right?
Right.
So I like that. So the teachers are smarter than we thought. The concert was held in the United Church, and it was always a full house. Santa came at the end, tried to kiss the lady teachers, and delivered candy and a small gift. We went home tired but happy as Christmas holidays had arrived, and there was no school for 10 days or so. It was a pretty exciting time of the year for us. And then the field meet was really cool too, because it was, when you think about it, it was really well arranged because there was all these little schools in the area. Like besides, there was, the consolidated schools. There was Manitou, Pilot Mound. I don't know if Crystal City was in that or not. Darlingford, Larrivere, they all had town schools, and we competed against each other. But it was all done in a fair way because it was done on a percentage basis. So if Snowflake had 100 kids and Manitou had 200, Well, it was done as a ratio as to your number of students in your school. So it was really fair. And the country schools competed against each other. So in the mornings, it was like races and high jump and broad jump. And that shot put, I suppose, if you were old enough. In the afternoon, we had team sports, dodgeball for the younger grades, volleyball, and softball. And yeah, it was something you really look forward to. Of course, it was a busy time of the year in farming communities, so not everybody's parents could be there. So the van driver usually brought a load of kids, and sometimes I was one of them. So,
Huh.
yeah.
Did you practice? Did you practice your shot put and long jump and those types of things?
Actually, I was pretty good. I wasn't a very good racer, but like we had these competitions at our own school first to see who was going to go because you could only put so many you were allowed, I don't know if it was 2 or 3 competitors in each event, probably 2. And I liked high jump, which kind of makes me laugh now. I can hardly get off the ground. But I wasn't that wonderful an athlete, but I was okay, and I loved the volleyball and the softball. Those were big deals for us. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, Snowflake was a very sports type of community. They're known for that.
Oh yeah,
Like,
they were.
even if people hadn't been to Snowflake, they had been there for a ball tournament or something.
Yeah. Yeah, we had a lot of pride, a lot of small town pride is what we had too. You wanted to do well against the bigger team.
Sure.
Not so. And then at school, of course, we looked forward because we didn't have a gym, so any sports activities were outside. And so we didn't actually have, well, there was a piano in the one room, I guess. So you look forward to things like the Halloween party and the Valentine party and that sort of thing. That was a big deal.
And you say here, boy, did we take it seriously.
Yeah, we did. Yeah, we did. Oh, yeah. I mean, it was crepe paper to decorate, and obviously there was no plastic, so everything was done by hand. And the Valentine box was very important too, to have it decorated. And yeah, used to have monitors that passed out the Valentines, and
oh yeah.
Things changed a little over the years. Like I know when I was teaching, by this time, people were encouraged to send a Valentine to every kid in the class, rather than just a few friends. And the other thing that we did sometimes at the end of my teaching career was you passed out the Valentines at the very end of the school day. You didn't wait, to detract from what you were trying to do at the party. So it also made it less noticeable if somebody got nicer things than the other people. So, yeah. And we drew names at Christmas time. I don't think I mentioned that, but a small gift, and that didn't change too much over the years. So, but you probably would have a hard time with the school facilities that we had to use, because in the summer it was outdoor toilets. There was the girls' toilets and the boys' toilets, and they were not supposed to be anywhere near each other's toilets. And there would be some bigger holes and smaller holes because there were different size bums going into those bathrooms.
More toilet stories.
I know. And in the wintertime, of course, it was down in the basement. And oh my God, when you think about that.
Well, it's, again, lucky for me, foreign concept, but here's what'll really tick you off. What I remember about the outhouses behind the Snowflake School is that that's where we used to play anti over.
Yeah.
That's it. We didn't use the outhouses. They were still there, but we just used them to play a game. Now, how much do you want to just choke me for telling you that? But that's my experience with outhouses.
And then, of course, so to be the janitor, when you think about it, how the janitor was, well, he was some of the janitors you liked better than others, and like it wasn't an easy job. You know, when you think about it,
No.
you had to deal with bringing in water. You had to make sure that those coal furnaces were supplied. Well, that somebody supplied the coal. They didn't have to, but they had to shovel it into the furnace, and
Mhm.
and that was down in the basement of that big old school. And I don't know if you know there was steam heat, like it was steam heat, so it had to be a boiler.
Mm.
Yeah. How people manage, you know, so well, and they learned how to do what they had to do, and they did it, you know. So most of the snowflake kids were involved in one way or another, so it was a very exciting day. I wasn't much of a runner, but could jump and play on the team events. I loved playing ball and was a decent first baseman or shortstop, but not a great hitter. Because we were short-handed, we often had to play up an age category. How frustrating it was to have a fielder that gawked around and didn't focus on the game. Nameless shall they be. And I I could I could say the name, but I'm not going to, because this particular lady has just passed away. So we'll let it
Ah,
go at that. Yeah.
okay.
And playing ball wasn't the top of her list. She was a
Yeah.
fielder. And yeah. Anyway, we packed a lunch to the field meet just like any other school day. No one had much money for the booth. And I don't even remember much about the booth. I imagine they did have a few things. I don't think it would have been like hamburgers, hot dogs, anything like that. Probably just drinks, and I'm
Yeah.
not sure. I'm not sure about that. Worst day of
I
my
don't.
school life happened in grade 4. We big kids took music with the grade 5 to 8 class and had been warned that if we got into trouble, we would be facing the strap when we got back to our room. So as we were lined up in rows practicing songs for the concert with Miss Velma Motherall, she was the grade 5 to 8 teacher, I playfully gave my good friend Mavis Gower a little pinch. She was startled and let out a little yelp. When questioned, she had to tell, and I got sent out into the hall with Morley Hampford and Elwyn Brown, who were also guilty of some misdemeanor. True to her word, the strap was administered by our own teacher, the only one on each hand, but my heart was broken, and I just couldn't stop crying. And I mean, I could not stop crying. I'd get stopped, and then it would start again. You know?
So you just couldn't relate to that you were getting the strap.
Yeah, yeah. I just
Because
had
how could
no,
this be happening to you?
you know, I'd never been knocked around. I guess that's the thing. We were never knocked around at home. Dad just gave us a eye or the voice, and we straightened up if he. The boys thought it was a hoot, of course.
Jeez.
I suppose. Okay. So our school was made of brick and a very high school. There was a long flight of stairs leading to the second floor and a bit shorter one to the basement where the high school room was in the early days and where the furnace room and the bathrooms were, as well as a cloakroom. The floors were plain wood treated with some kind of oil that kept the dust down, like they were black in color, really dark brown or black, you know. And you didn't dare get down on them. Like you could never sit on the floor. Like I did later years with my school kids a lot. We sat on the floor a lot.
Yes.
Some of them were the desks were placed in rows and they were screwed into the floor. Some of them were double desks, so you hoped you'd get a friendly desk mate. In the higher grades, some of the desks had lift up tops. You've seen those with the
Yeah.
lift up top. So you could hide behind if you were doing something secretive, like writing a note or making faces at someone, but you didn't want to get caught. When I was in high school, the principal moved the primary grades to the lower level and the big kids to the main floor. The school was built in such a way that it could have been doubled in size had Snowflake become a boom town, which I think they thought it was going to become a boom town, you know, in the early days. Um, a hall ran all the way around the staircase. On the main floor was the chemistry lab, and on the upper was a library. But I don't remember there being many books in it. I know that. It was also the place where the dreaded traveling Dr. McPhail and his nurse came periodically to give us our shots and to check us over for such lovely things as scabies or other diseases. One family was so afraid they tried to hide, and one of them fainted when she saw his car coming. And that was the Wren family.
Oh,
Gladys Wren and Rita Wren, they were just, and Bob, I think too, they were just absolutely terrified of getting a shot.
yeah. Well, I wasn't one of the brave kids for that.
You weren't?
No,
Oh, okay.
didn't want it. Made your arm
That,
hurt. Didn't want the poke.
that never bothered me.
Yeah.
We had fire drills more or less regularly. The basement room was half in the ground, so there was a set of stairs to climb out the window. I'm not sure how that worked in the winter. I assume we just didn't have fire drills, probably. On the main floor, you could go out the entrance in the hall, but there was also a window escape down a set of steps. The exciting one was the fire chute from the second floor. It was only to be used in case of a fire or a drill. But since the teachers rarely stayed for lunch, it was common for us to play on it with a lookout posted for signs of Miss Cumming, she was the principal, or one of the other teachers returning from lunch. Let me tell you, it was quite a ride. It was. It was a metal thing, and you just flew down there. Some kids were too afraid to use it even during a fire drill.
Hmm. Kids are daredevils, though, hey? Like, I remember going on every carnival ride, and the more treacherous or scary, the better.
Okay.
I
And
wouldn't go on anything
I
like
can't
that.
say I've ever liked those, but the fire chute was pretty cool.
Yeah, it
Our
sounds.
school curriculum was very academic. We had textbooks and notebooks. The blackboard was usually filled with questions or notes, which were then copied into our scribblers. Often we were sent to the board with chalk in hand to solve questions given by the teacher. That way he or she could watch many students at one time. If we had, misbehaved, we might have to write lines either on foolscap or on the board. Some of our teachers had us memorize poetry. By June, in grade 6, I had to know 26 poems from the High Roads to Reading reader. And I have that reader up here right above my head here. It's got some beautiful poems, but I didn't appreciate them at the time because that was a lot of poetry to memorize.
Yeah.
I still can remember the words for "Oh God, our help in ages past" when they play it at the Remembrance Day service or in Flanders Fields. I said I can still recite "Stopping by Woods on a Snowy Evening." Don't ask me to do it right now, though, because I might have forgotten. A few of us had the chance to take piano lessons from Miss Gwen Pringle, who drove from Manitou once a week during the fall and spring. We were allowed to leave school and hustle over to Auntie Vi's, where she had the use of the piano room. Now, Auntie Vi's, where I first went for that, they lived right across from the United Church. Do you remember where Burl Hedrick lived?
No.
No, okay. Well, there was a house there. They lived in that for quite a while. I think they must have rented it, and then they moved over to on the further west on that house that used to be Uncle Mark Booker's. No, or did Mark Booker's get it after them? I can't remember. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter.
I know how.
I learned the basics, but I never got so I could accompany anyone or even manage sheet music. I wasn't a natural, but I don't regret the bit of knowledge that I received. I know a little bit, but not much. I've forgotten the names of stuff too, so.
Yes.
Also, we had 4-H sewing club for a few years. I only had 1 year of it, but learned a bit about hand sewing and knitting. Later, I learned to use the sewing machine more or less on my own, but had a bit of help from Mum, who considered herself to be a plain sewer, and of course from Myrna, who was very adept with the needle and excelled on the sewing machine. She had left home, though, when I was going into grade 5. So, when there's 7 years difference in your age, that's
Yeah.
a lot.
Now, I don't remember, Auntie, if this write-up elaborates about you getting your first sewing machine, does it?
Yes, it does later on, yeah.
Okay, then I'll leave my questions about that till we get there.
Okay, my only sewing machine.
Oh, it's a Bernina.
I still have it, yeah.
Yeah. It's quite simple, but really good quality. Doesn't have a
Yeah.
lot of fancy decorative stuff, but it's like
Well,
a,
it does. Mine does have decorative stuff
oh, does
on it,
it?
but you know, it's probably like I've had it looked after in the over the years, but I don't do much sewing with it, and I don't do any really heavy sewing. So
Right. Well, while we're talking about it, you know what really surprised me when we were recording the Zoom call for Dad's birthday,
mhm.
I was quite surprised to learn that my siblings didn't know the history of how Dad learned to sew.
Oh, he was just, you know, well, you shouldn't be surprised. Like, okay, I was at teaching school at Roland, and I got this machine, and I sewed quite a few nice outfits there. And then I
Yeah.
brought it home on the Easter long weekend, or the Easter weekend, because I was going to sew my wedding dress on it. So Bob he just loved that machine. He loved using the stitches and trying all the different things. And, you know, yeah, he made little clothes for, I don't know, did he have dolls of some kind or something?
I don't know. I just think that,
Mm.
like, I knew the story. I was just surprised that my siblings didn't know the story. Because when you're a kid or an adult kid, you think everybody knows the same stories.
I
That's
know.
what surprised me a lot. That was eye opening for me because I was like, no,
Yeah.
no, no, we all know the same stuff. And then I was like, oh, I guess we don't. So I knew that Dad learned because he was mechanically minded. He
Yeah.
mostly was curious about the mechanics of that.
The mechanics of the machine, yeah.
But you can't help but learn how to sew. So we were thinking how it was quite by accident that he learned to hem pants or put in a zipper.
Yeah.
Dad's learning how to sew originated from what? His desire to replace a zipper, his curiosity of the mechanics of it, or because he thought it would impress the ladies?
Impress the ladies.
Oh, you probably need to fix the zipper.
Yeah, yeah, that's what I'm thinking.
No!
The mechanics?
The story goes Auntie Mary got a Bernina sewing machine and he wanted to learn the mechanics of how it worked. And then some of the side effects that come with that is learning how to actually sew.
Well,
That's the story.
Dad's a mean seamstress.
He really is.
Seamster. Excuse me.
Karen put sewing a mean patch. So true.
Yeah.
And as I was doing things, he would, like, as I was learning how to do some of those things too. And then don't forget Myrna also. Like, if he was going down to Myrna's, she always had a good sewing machine. Maybe he even did some stuff down there. I don't know. But mostly I remember him at the dining room table, fooling around. I had to pretty near fight him to get the use of the sewing machine because he was enjoying it so much.
That's so funny. And for me, I don't know why. I should ask him. He probably could tell me. I have a guess. Because Dad was very involved with my sewing. Now, I was the third girl that had to take sewing, and I don't know for sure, but I think my parents kind of were getting tired of it by the time I came along. Like, they were maybe not running a kid to volleyball, and they didn't want to traipse all over for my ball tournaments, and they were kind of running out of steam, I think. They were kind of like, oh my God, again? So when Dad was helping me with sewing, I almost was guessing that Mom said, Bob, I did the other two kids, you take this one. Because my sisters don't know anything about Dad being the one to help them with sewing, and I got a reaction. Like, my teacher was Vivian Weeks, and she kind of had a bit of a reaction when I said Dad was helping me. And my classmates, you know, that were taking 4-H were kind of like, your dad is helping you?
Well, you
How come
probably
your mom's not helping
kind of
you?
appreciate the fact then that Chris did all the sewing in their family, you know, Bonnie and Chris, like Chris
Yeah.
always did all the sewing.
Yes.
And now that Bonnie is retired and is learning to sew, and Chris is guiding her through a lot of it and teaching her how to do things, you know, with sewing. So, you know, it's your dad was ahead of his time, I guess.
Yeah, and good for Chris. He at least makes Dad feel like he's not the only one on the planet, probably. So, but it is a mechanical thing, and Chris is very of a mechanical guy.
Yeah.
You know, he likes all his big toys and everything. But I think that Mom, if she wanted her pants hemmed properly, she'd go and say, "Bob, hem my pants," and he'd just do a wonderful job of that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
So Dad,
you know what? Good for them, because it was talk about needing to share some of the workload. Hey,
Yeah.
your mom had a lot. Your mom had a heavy workload because, mind you, she was a worker, so she drove herself to do a lot of stuff. But when you think about it, your dad was away a fair little bit with music and one thing another, and it was.
And I think Mom had her teaching schedule too, so it's not like she didn't have
Absolutely.
that.
We mustn't forget. We mustn't forget that. We get talking about everything Bob did and everything.
Yeah. Like I think they both had a lot to do, but I just really get a kick out of how the list of what my dad can't do is very short.
Yeah.
Because he can do a lot of things, including hem your pants like nobody. Which kind of started with your machine. That's fun.
Because there were multiple grades in these classrooms, there should have been enough time after assignments to get our homework done. But I know I spent time listening to the other lessons and also just wasting time. Most nights there was homework. So like my kids now, they don't seem to have a lot of homework. But anyway, I actually didn't mind that routine. My dad could still do algebra and geometry, so could lend a hand if needed. I still remember the article Mr. Dowdy, he was our principal, had us discuss how Canada gained her autonomy, and I sure wish I had a copy of it. Exam time could be very stressful. In those days, the way you passed from one grade to the next, this is in high school, particularly, well, all through school, I think, was dependent on the June exam. Like in high school, those exams came from the Department of Education. The teachers tried to help us prepare by using samples from other years, but you never could be sure what would be on them. They were usually 3 hours in length, and there could be 2 in one day. That's in grade like 11 and 12, Even grade 10, I think we might have had. But I particularly remember grade 11 and grade 12. They were sent away to be marked, so you never knew if you passed until August 1st. That somehow did not seem fair, because what if you worked hard all year and then got sick at exam time, or you just drew a blank that day? Also, who enjoyed studying when it was hot outside and in? But that was how it was, and we sure had to work for our education. My grandkids seldom have homework and seem to spend a lot of time doing extracurricular stuff, I guess. But nowadays, you can Google just about anything you want to know. I know that I do.
Yeah.
But definitely to me, that was a very unfair system, that your schoolwork during the year at that time should have counted towards your passing your grade. And it really didn't. Yeah. Some other stuff I remember from those days: playing hangman or X's and O's on the blackboard on stormy days, ping pong or crocodile in the upper room, learning to jive and jitterbug at noon with our girlfriends. And as I say, we didn't have electricity, so I don't know what we did for music. Also skipping games. In grade 11, Mr. Dowdy let us go to the lab on our own for experiments. I guess he trusted us not to blow up the school, but I do remember a spill of acid on the table, which we dumped into a metal pail, and guess what? A chemical reaction. No pail. And age. At Snowflake, there was no grade 12, so many students ended up their formal education and at grade 11. Morley Hanford and I went to Pilot Mound to finish high school. I boarded with Aunt Jessie McTaggart, who made a living for herself and 13-year-old Bonnie Jean by taking in boarders. Uncle Bill had passed away about 6 years before this. They had a cozy little home with 3 bedrooms upstairs. They weren't very big bedrooms. I shared a room with Gladys Lundgren, who worked at the telephone office, and sometimes with Bonnie when her brother Jim commandeered her room on his layoff time from the CPR. Gail Gibson, who is now Gail, you know who it is. She's the mother of the guy who does your drone things.
Oh, Curry.
Yeah, Gail Curry. Gail Gibson is her name. She had the other room and worked in the bank.
Isn't
Aunt
that
Jessie
funny?
slept on a couch downstairs and always had it made up by the time we came down for breakfast. She was a great cook and a wonderful manager. On weekends, unless the roads were too bad, the Hanfords and my folks took turns picking us up to go home to Snowflake. Pilot Mountain School welcomed us, and I had a good year there. I think there were only 10 or 12 of us in grade 12, and I was the only girl, but I had girlfriends in grade 10 and 11. By grade 12, those darn boys had got a lot smarter, and I was no longer guaranteed top marks. I worked hard but had fun too. We would have coffee at the cafe after school and sometimes go to a movie during the week. I curled with the high school one day a week and belonged to the square dance club. Morley was my partner, and Bonnie Jean that is, loaned me a very full square dance skirt. One thing that seemed really weird was to be competing at the field meet or the district curling championship against my little snowflake.
That's good. This is great. I just love that you wrote all this stuff down. I really do.
Well, it's a way of, as I said, thank goodness to being able to do it on a computer too, because as you get something, you just go back and stick it in, and yeah.
Totally true. I don't know what motivated Grandma MacArthur to start doing her diaries, but it is actually not a surprise to me, knowing her personality. She would be exactly the right kind of person to write in a diary. If I think about my life, I can tell you there's nothing I need to write down. I go to work, I go to Costco, I come home, like nothing's going on. There was a lot of stuff going on then to document. And I really think it's great when you have something that you think you need to write down. I suppose my way of remembering the past or whatever is just doing what I'm doing, is just getting people to tell me the stories so that I can learn them, because I didn't know all the stories, and I didn't know that you had to be in the right place at the right time to hear them.
Well, don't forget though that you you have told some stories of how you fixed your Jeep up, your pet Jeep, and stories about your yard and about making wine and about making different kinds of cookies and stuff. So those are all things that, for yourself even to look back on them, and your trips that you took to Wings and you took to, to Hawaii and so on. They're all things that you can look back on. So there's different ways of
I like remembering vacations and documenting things on my Jeep that I want to look at in 10 years and remember what I did.
Right.
But I would just want to say that on a daily basis, it seems very mundane, and I might document things that are a little bit more seem exciting in life that just aren't daily. Like I would have nothing to write in a 5-year diary, honestly. There'd just seem like nothing going on. But
well, mine isn't all that exciting, I can tell you, but it's only 2 or 3 lines. So,
that's true.
Like today's, I'll probably say, got up way too early, so I was tired this morning, but went to exercise anyway. And then I could go on and say about how I wasted a whole bunch of time. And I could also tell you that I wasted some food, which I wouldn't want my grandma to know about. Oh. I was debating what I was going to make for supper tomorrow night for Shirley and Robert when they came. Yeah. And I had in my head, I've got some ground beef in the deep freeze, and I think maybe I'm going to make little meatballs, and I'll get them made ahead of time, and then we'll have meatballs. I'll make stroganoff or whatever. So anyway, I went down and got up 2 packages, and they've been in there quite a while. The one color was not all that great, but I thought, oh, well, it'll be fine because they've been in the freezer all along. So I put them both, the 2 packages, in a bowl. Now, just to show you that your aunt is not always very smart, because then I got looking at them as they're thawing, and I decided that I did not like the looks of that one package of meat. It was kind of gray looking. And I know that it was probably just fine because they tell us that, meat will look a little gray. Like if it's not bright red, it's probably still okay because they do put stuff in meat to make it stay redder in the stores. Yeah. So anyway, to make a long story short, I have decided I'm not going to use it. Yeah. But I have repackaged it and refreezing it, and I'm going to offer it to somebody for their dog. Mm-hmm. And I'm sure there's not and definitely the one package I've wasted because if I just thawed them in 2 separate bowls, for God's sakes, but no, I put them both in the same bowl. Then I get thinking, well, what if, so anyway, I've wasted a few dollars, but anyway. So
yes, I suppose they would never do that back in the day. They'd never waste a single thing.
No. Well, and you see, that's my fault for keeping it in the deep freeze so long. I should have used it long ago, made some soup out of it, which I normally would do, but I just didn't do it this summer. Yes. Never mind. I'm not gonna live or die on whether that $20 worth of meat.
That's right.
Got tossed or not.
And so you keep a diary. You keep a diary.
Oh yeah.
And it's a 5-year diary, just like Grandma?
Yeah, yeah.
And how long have you been keeping that?
Quite a while, pretty well since after Grandma died. So I've got at least 4 of them. Yeah.
Good for you.
It comes in handy to look back on stuff and say, oh, I wonder what I served Robert and Shirley last year when they were here. I'm sure they were here last year. So I went through it. In October they were here, and guess what? I served them chicken and rice, and that's what I thought I was going to do instead of the meatballs. So now I've changed my mind again now. So I'm going to make scalloped potatoes. So I have to go and get some potatoes from the store. And because I said to Rochelle, I don't really enjoy making meals for people anymore, unless it's scalloped potatoes and ham. And she said, well, what's wrong with scalloped potatoes and ham? So she's probably hoping there'll be a big pot made and she'll get some left over.
Well, you won't have to fight all your kids for the chili sauce that goes with the scalloped potatoes because they won't want any.
Dumb kids. Now, would you be awfully upset if I was to give a jar of your beautiful jam and one of your chili sauce to Shirley?
No, if that's what you'd like to do with it, then you just.
I'd like her to. That is the most beautiful jam I have ever eaten.
Oh wow!
Maybe you'll get me the recipe, or maybe it was just happened that it was the wonderful strawberries you got. Or
I can totally send you the recipe, and all it is Barb is my rhubarb supplier. Barb, you could call her, and I just use I think they're organic. They probably don't have to be. Frozen strawberries from Costco, because I can't worry about making it whenever strawberries are in season or any of that stuff. But I would put it this way. Rhubarb is very hard to get, but I'm lucky because Barb usually saves me some.
Yeah.
And so I can make it anytime because it's in the freezer.
I have rhubarb, but Val got that for me from a friend of hers, and they used to have a lovely rhubarb plant, but it got torn up when they were doing something to their yard. So anyway, yeah. So if you will send me that sometime. I don't need to make any right now because it's lovely and
it's really good. And it's just by fluke. The first time I made that recipe, which was probably not even a year ago, I was like, wow, this is a keeper. So I've given it to Barb and I'll give it to you. And I wanted to let you know I made my second batch of chili sauce, as you know, and what I did different this time was I cut the tomatoes up just a little bit finer. I left a little bit more of the liquid in, and I did bump up the spices slightly, just a little bit more. And I'll tell you, I'm really, really happy with it.
Well, that's good.
Already on my second batch. I'm really happy.
Great. Lovely.
Yeah. And I made the big batch.
We're down to less than 1 minute.
I know.
So that's good. I thought maybe you had canned questions you were going to ask all the way through here, but that's okay if we'll do this again.
I was winging it. I was just going to write down anything that came up as you were talking. And I thank you for being willing to share your stories, because I don't think I'm the only one who's going to be interested in hearing it. So.